Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. So we've got Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, coming out next month. And as per usual, whenever a saga film comes out, I have to do a series of Star Wars related videos. When The Force Awakens came out, I reviewed the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. When The Last Jedi came out, I did 3 videos going over all the special edition changes to the original trilogy. And now with The Rise of Skywalker, I'm going to be doing sort of a retrospect on the entire Skywalker Saga. I'm not going to do Rogue One, I'm not going to do Solo, I'm not going to do the Clone Wars, because those are spin-off films. I want to focus on the actual saga itself. The episodic films are going to be the main focus of this series. And rather than going in chronological order, I'm going to go in the order these movies were made. This is more of a video talking about why I love Star Wars overall, with the original trilogy being the primary focus. And while this video might be more focused on the original trilogy, this pretty much encompasses the entire franchise. Contradicting the thing I said where I'm not going to talk about the spin-offs, because it does kind of include the spin-offs as well. This is just an overall why I love Star Wars video. And this was actually kind of a tough video to come up with because there are many reasons why people love Star Wars. It's one of the biggest cultural phenomenons ever. It's a staple in American pop culture and has a real mythology to it that people go frickin' nuts over, whether it's for the best or for the absolute worst. So I actually narrowed down my reasons why I love Star Wars down to 3. The first reason is the imaginative worlds. Up until I saw the original trilogy, I had never seen anything like this before, ranging from the imaginative worlds, the creature designs, the starship designs, and just the way this galaxy functions. I'll never forget the first time I ever saw the Jawas, the creatures that you find in the cantina, whether they be Rhodians, Trandoshans, or any of the other creatures within the cantina. I'll never forget the first time I ever saw the X-Wings, the Y-Wings, TIE Fighters, Millennium Falcon, AT-AT, the Death Star, the Star Destroyers. Never forget the first time I saw the Stormtroopers, C-3PO, R2-D2. I'll never forget the first time I was scared of Darth Vader, and scared as shit the first time I saw Alderaan get blown up by the Death Star. Those are just some iconic images that you never forget, and the fact that I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I saw the original trilogy just leaves such a huge impression on me, to the point where I just didn't really focus on the story. When I was a kid, I just watched movies for the pure visuals. I didn't really understand the plots. I didn't understand why characters did what they did. I was just so entranced by the pretty colors and the way it looked. And even with seeing the prequels from the ages of 8 to 14, I still remember all the impressive designs, just the way the movies looked. I'll talk more about the prequels next week, but that's just the overall impression that the franchise itself has given me with its unique world building. But as soon as I got older, I started appreciating a lot more aspects, which leads into number 2 on why I love Star Wars. The story, the characters, and their journey. I'd never owned the series on VHS, so renting them from Blockbuster or seeing them at a friend's house was like an event for me. It was such a huge deal to watch one of these movies. And then that novelty just kind of went away once I bought the original trilogy on DVD, because I now own the movies. But when I watched the original trilogy on DVD for the first time, I really got into the characters and just the overall story. I finally got to understand why these characters ended up doing what they were doing. And it's really neat to see a lot of these characters evolve. Like with Luke Skywalker, for example. Throughout this entire series, it's really cool to see him start out as a farm boy who just wants something more, realizing that his father was a Jedi, leaving Tatooine to go on this adventure to save Princess Leia, join the rebellion and fight the Death Star, and then going through his ups and downs in Empire Strikes Back, learning the ways of the Force through Yoda, finding out that Darth Vader is actually his father, Anakin Skywalker, and then going into Return of the Jedi, where he fully embraces the fact that Vader is his father, and he's on a quest to pretty much redeem him. And even his midlife crisis, where he pretty much cuts himself off from the Force, turns his back on the old Jedi Order, and realizes that their actions and their beliefs have led to nothing but horrible things throughout the galaxy. That entire hero's journey is just really fascinating to watch, and even with a character like Han Solo, seeing him start out as a ruthless scoundrel of a character who only cares about himself, Chewbacca, the Falcon, and money, and seeing the friendships that he develops with the other characters to the point where he sacrifices himself just for the safety of his friends in Empire Strikes Back is a very great arc as well. With the character of Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, seeing him start out as a young Jedi who has a lot of darkness within him, eventually turn to the dark side and become Darth Vader, it's a very tragic story. And again, I'll talk about the prequels more next week. This video is more about the overall franchise. Knowing every little detail that goes into Anakin Skywalker's story really makes him to be a tragic character that you sympathize for. I'll always see Darth Vader as evil on the outside, but knowing who this character is inside really adds a sense of tragedy. Seeing him redeem himself at the end of Return of the Jedi and save his son is a very powerful sequence, assuming you don't watch the Blu-ray version where Darth Vader goes, "No!" But beyond that, it's still a very powerful moment. It's kind of similar to what we're seeing with Kylo Ren. Obviously, The Rise of Skywalker has not come out yet, so we'll see how this story concludes, but it's another interesting take that I'll elaborate on more once I actually get into the sequel trilogy. And then finally, the last aspect of why I love these movies kind of has to go down to the filmmaking. In the video that I made earlier this year on why I love Godzilla, I talked about how I grew appreciation for the filmmaking aspect and how all these special effects came to be. And the same thing applies for Star Wars. When you watch the unaltered version of A New Hope and see all the behind-the-scenes footage on how these effects were made, you can really get a sense of how they were done. But even then, when I watched Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, since those effects are leagues better than in A New Hope, I tell myself the entire time, I know how these effects were done, but how did they do it? And speaking of Return of the Jedi, that's probably the most visual effects driven film of the original trilogy. I know there's the cantina scene, but in Jabba's palace you have even more creatures there that are all on camera, and whether they be actors in suits like Bib Fortuna or the Gamorrean guards, or puppets like with Jabba the Hutt, Salacious Crumb, or the Rancor, it's still impressive to see all the work that goes into these creature designs. And even with the Imperial Walkers, the stop motion is very, very convincing, and it really adds to that more robotic feel. There's honestly never a point where I watch the Battle of Hoth or the Battle of Endor, look at those walkers and say, that's a special effect. And you also get a clear sense of what inspired these movies, because the plot to A New Hope is pretty much The Hidden Fortress from Akira Kurosawa, with a few tweaks here and there to where it's not the same movie. And those movies themselves have a direct parallel to westerns as well. Seven Samurai led to The Magnificent Seven, Yojimbo led to A Fistful of Dollars, and Star Wars itself took inspiration from westerns. The Cantina from A New Hope is like a western bar. The Mandalorian is just a western made within the Star Wars series. And beyond the movies that helped influence Star Wars and give it its themes, there is a lot of political subtext within this entire franchise. The Galactic Civil War is pretty much an allegory for the American Revolution, where you have the Empire as the British and the Rebel Alliance as America fighting for independence. That's why every Imperial officer and higher authority, with the exception of Vader, is British. And the prequel trilogy had allegories for the Iraq War, how it was an unjust war that did not need to happen other than furthering the political gain of whoever was in charge at the time. Whether that aspect was handled well or not, we'll talk about more next week. And with the sequel trilogy, I truly believe that the First Order does represent the Trump administration, because you have this faction that was never taken seriously by the New Republic, but then once they actually got power, they ended up being an immediate threat, and even more dangerous since their leaders are unhinged. 90% of Star Wars media has some sort of political angle to it. It just baffles me why there's some people that say politics should stay out of Star Wars, because it's always been there. You just weren't paying attention to those aspects. All these reasons just lead to why I ultimately love this franchise more than others. I might talk about Godzilla on this channel more often than I do Star Wars, but Star Wars is honestly just a more immersive world. With Godzilla, it's just our world, but with monsters in there. With this, it's different planets, different vehicles, different architecture, different technology. For me, it's on par with the Wizarding World, where it's such a different and unique world that you kind of get sucked into the lore, and even though there might be some pieces of media that you dislike over others, you still love this world and you still find yourself immersed into it, and you honestly can't give it up. For all of Star Wars' ups and downs, I can never give up on this franchise because there's just so much imagination going into it, whether it's from the world building, seeing these characters, the filmmaking aspect, and the fact that we get different people tackling this franchise with their own unique visions, whether it be Jon Favreau for The Mandalorian, Dave Filoni for The Clone Wars, J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson for the sequel trilogy, or George Lucas just for the entire franchise and where it started. It's just nice to see so many different people tackle this franchise and give their own creative spin to it to make it fresh and new at points. This was a tough video to make because it's hard to really narrow down why I love Star Wars, but I hope that explains it to the best of my abilities. Next week, we're going to actually stay more focused. We're going to talk about the prequel trilogy because we're 4 movies into the Disney era of Star Wars. I think it's only fair to look back on the prequel trilogy to see how they compare to the newer movies, or if they've gotten better, or if they've just kind of stayed the same. So look forward to that video next Wednesday. But for right now, I want to know why you love Star Wars. Is it for the aspects I listed? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.